Hey, 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 hey. It is Wednesday's Weird Stories coming back to you, and we are trying something new tonight. So if you're listening in, you can also get the multimedia experience by surfing over to Facebook and facebook.com/rocksoulradio. And we are streaming live on Facebook Live tonight too. So hello to the Facebook fans, hello to the radio fans, and hey, how's everybody doing? Today is a couple of holidays. Well, we've got Valentine's Day, we've got Ash Wednesday, Lupercalia, if you want to go for that too. So there's a lot of stuff going on today. A lot of, I don't know what you're doing, but hopefully you're spending a little bit of time with me here on the airwaves and listening to some stories. Before I get started, since it is Valentine's Day, I do want to give a big shout out to that lady in the back right there. That is my wife, Deidre. Happy Valentine's Day to you, baby. She is in another part of the house doing her own Facebook stuff. She has a phenomenal card reading page, a divination page, Deidre Como Soulscapes Readings, where every Wednesday from 7:30 to 8:30, she does free one-card readings for those who are interested. So if you are into the whole divination thing, maybe you got a burning question that you just want to see what the universe has going on for you, and you can check out her page, Deidre Como Soulscapes Reading, and give the page a like. Join the events on Wednesdays from 7:30 to 8:30. What you can do, go over there first, get the reading from her, and then surf yourself back on over here to listen to the story too. Or, you know what? If you don't get there first, you can have the Wednesday's Weird Stories on in the background while you're getting your reading. 2 for 1, right? Awesome sauce. Good stuff. So back to what we've got going on tonight. We've got changing things up a little bit in my research for the stories and trying to find different authors and stuff like that. I've been looking for some unique stuff, and I came across a ghost story by Mark Twain. Now, and let me correct myself. This is a ghost story by Samuel Clemens. This was actually first published under his given name, Samuel Clemens, back in like 1906, and was not originally published under his pen name of Mark Twain, which in my research of Mark Twain, I also found out that he took that pen name from his time as a riverboat captain, and when they were gauging the depth of the river, Mark 1 would be a 6-foot depth, 1 fathom. 2 fathoms of 12 feet was actually Mark Twain, and then 3 Mark Three, and then 4 Mark 4. Why they couldn't say 2 or 3, I don't know. But it was Mark 1, Mark Twain, Mark Three, and Mark 4. And the ability to sail cleanly was at least Mark Twain, so he liked that. He decided to use that as a pen name, and it's kind of all history from there. So as you know, Mark Twain, one of the most prolific and popular American writers of the modern times, brilliant humorist, satirist, storyteller, wrote a lot of short stories, a number of full-length novels. The 2 most popular, obviously, being Adventures of Tom Sawyer and the spin-off from that actually got a little bit more popular, was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which has really been noted by all of the critics, and that as really the greatest American novel of all time. So, way to go, Mark. When I came across this story of his, a ghost story, it wasn't something that I was fully expecting, because he's not, one that really jumps to mind when you think about the paranormal, when you think about weird stories and horror fiction and stuff like that. He's always, a very grounded person, had a very kind of down-to-earth outlook on life as well. So when I saw Mark Twain, a ghost story, it kind of piqued my interest a little bit. And turns out because of the popularity of the weird tales at that time, between the 19th and 20th, early 20th century, there was, all of this stuff going on. The spiritualist movement was really strong during that time. There was a lot of stuff going on in that kind of horror and haunted realm. So he decided that he was going to put out a little satire about this whole haunted house and ghost stuff. And whether or not he believes in ghosts, I don't know. Whether or not he had any thought about the paranormal, I don't know. All I know is this man seemed to work in virtually every haunted house cliche, ghost cliche, and stuff that we're still hearing daily on all the different ghost shows, the ghost hunting shows, and paranormal stuff like that. It all got kind of rolled into one big story, and it's funny, it's amusing, I enjoyed it. So that's what we've got for you tonight. As I mentioned last week and in the weekly update as well, going forward until she gets home, Grace will be on background noises tonight. Grace is our little foster kitten. She's about 8 months old. We are taking care of her for Cat Van Doo, trying to find her a home. And you may see her kind of popping around back there on the couch or trying to get up onto the stuff there and playing with toys and that in the background. So if that happens, just know that it's a little kitten playing around. And if you're in the Chicago area and you're interested in adopting a cat, check out catvando.org. That's catvando.org, and see what they got. They've got just a ton of animals that are ready for adoptions now. Find out what think about what your personality is, what kind of cat you might like, and you never know. Maybe it'd be Grace. She'll be ready hopefully in a couple of weeks to go to her forever home. So we're going to keep pimping her, and you might get a little spot of her playing around in the background. So don't let that distract you too much. All right. Well, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into tonight's story. This is A Ghost Story by Samuel Clemens. I took a large room far up Broadway in a huge old building whose upper stories had been wholly unoccupied for years, until I came. The place had long been given up to dust and cobwebs, to solitude and silence. I seemed groping among the tombs and invading the privacy of the dead that first night I climbed up to my quarters. For the time in my life, a superstitious dread came over me, and as I turned a dark angle of the stairway and an invisible cobweb slung its slazy woof in my face and clung there, I shuddered as one who had encountered a phantom. I was glad enough when I reached my room and locked out the mold and darkness. A cheery fire was burning in the grate, and I sat down before it with a comforting sense of relief. For 2 hours I sat there thinking of bygone times, recalling old scenes and summoning half-forgotten faces out of the mists of the past, listening in, fancy, to voices that long ago grew silent for all time, and to once familiar songs that nobody sings now. And as my reverie softened down to a sadder and sadder pathos, the shrieking of the winds outside softened to a wail, the angry beating of the rain against the panes diminished to a tranquil patter, and one by one the noises in the street subsided, until the hurrying footsteps of the last belated straggler died away in the distance and left no sound behind. The fire had burned low. A sense of loneliness crept over me. I arose and undressed, moving on tiptoe about the room, doing stealthily what I had to do, as if I were environed by sleeping enemies whose slumbers it would be fatal to break. I covered up in bed and lay listening to the rain and wind and the faint creaking of distant shutters till they lulled me to sleep. I slept profoundly, but how long I do not know. All at once I found myself awake and was filled with a shuddering expectancy. All was still, all but my own heart. I could hear it beat. Presently, the bedclothes began to slip away slowly toward the foot of the bed, as if someone were pulling them. I could not stir, I could not speak. Still the blankets slipped deliberately away till my breast was uncovered. Then with a great effort I seized them and drew them over my head. I waited, listened, waited. Once more that steady pull began, and I once more lay a torpid century of dragging seconds till my breast was naked again. At last I roused my energies and snatched the covers back to their place and held them with a strong grip. I waited. By and by I felt a faint tug and took a fresh grip. The tug strengthened to a steady strain. It grew stronger and stronger. My hold parted, and for the third time the blanket slid away. I groaned. An answering groan came from the foot of the bed. Beaded drops of sweat stood on my forehead. I was more dead than alive. Presently I heard a heavy footstep in my room. The step of an elephant, it seemed to be. It was not like anything human, but it was moving from me. There was relief in that. I heard it approach the door, pass out without moving the bolt or lock, and wander away among the dismal corridors, straining the floors and joists till they creaked against as it passed. Then silence reigned one more. When my excitement had calmed, I said to myself, "This is a dream, simply a hideous dream." And so I lay thinking it was over until I convinced myself that it was a dream. And then a comforting laugh relaxed my lips, and I was happy again. I got up and struck a light. When I found that the locks and bolts were just as I had left them, another soothing laugh welled in my heart and rippled from my lips. I took my pipe and lit it. It was just sitting down before the fire when down went the pipe out of my nerveless fingers. The blood forsook my cheeks, and my placid breathing was cut short with a gasp. In the ashes on the hearth, side by side with my own bare footprint, was another, so vast in comparison mine, but was an infant's. Then I had had a visitor, and the elephant tread was explained. I put out the light and returned to bed, palsied with fear. I lay a long time peering into the darkness and listening. Then I heard a grating noise overhead, like the dragging of a heavy body across the floor. Then the throwing down of the body and the shaking of my windows in response to the concussion. In distant parts of the building I heard the muffled slamming of doors. I heard, at intervals, stealthy footsteps creeping in and out among the corridors and up and down the stairs. Sometimes these noises approached my door, hesitated, and went away again. I heard the clanking of chains faintly in remote passages, and listened while the clanking grew nearer, while it wearily climbed the stairways, marking each move by the loose surplus of chain that fell with an accented rattle upon each succeeding step as the goblin that bore it advanced. I heard muttered sentences, half-uttered screams that seemed smothered violently, and the swish of invisible garments, the rush of invisible wings. Then I became conscious that my chamber was invaded, that I was not alone. I heard sighs and breathings about my bed, and mysterious whisperings. 3 little spheres of soft phosphorescent light appeared on the ceiling directly over my head, clung and glowed there a moment, and then dropped. 2 of them upon my face and 1 upon the pillow. They splattered liquidly and felt warm. Intuition told me they had turned to gouts of blood as they fell. I needed no light to satisfy myself of that. Then I saw pallid faces, dimly luminous and white uplifted hands floating bodiless in the air, floating a moment and then disappearing. The whispering ceased, and the voices and the sounds and a solemn stillness followed. I waited and listened. I felt that I must have light or die. I was weak with fear. I slowly raised myself toward a sitting posture, and my face came in contact with a clammy hand. All strength went from me, apparently, and I fell backward like a stricken invalid. Then I heard the rustle of a garment. It seemed to pass to the door and go out. When everything was once more still, I crept out of bed, sick and feeble, and lit the gas with a hand that trembled as if it were aged with 100 years. The light brought some little cheer to my spirits. I sat down and fell into a dreamy contemplation of that great footprint in the ashes. By and by its outlines began to waver and grow dim. I glanced up, and the broad gas flame was slowly wilting away. In the same moment I heard that elephantine tread again. I noted its approach, nearer and nearer along the musty halls, and dimmer the light waned. The tread reached my very door and paused. The light had dwindled to a sickly blue, and all things about me lay in a spectral twilight. The door did not open, and yet I felt a faint gust of air fan my cheek, and was presently conscious of a huge, cloudy presence before me. I watched it with fascinated eyes. A pale glow stole over the thing. Gradually, its cloudy folds took shape. An arm appeared, then legs, then a body, and last a great sad face looked out of the vapor, stripped of its filmy housings, naked, muscular, and comely. The majestic Cardiff giant loomed over me. All of my misery vanished, for a child might know that no harm could come with that benignant countenance. My cheerful spirits returned at once, and in sympathy with them the gas flamed up brightly again. Never a lonely outcast was so glad to welcome company as I was to greet the friendly giant. I said, "Why, it's nobody but you. Did you know I have been scared to death for the last 2 or 3 hours? I am most honestly glad to see you. I wish I had a chair. Here, don't try to sit down in that thing." But it was too late, and he was in it before I could stop him, and down he went. I never saw a chair shivered so in my life. Stop, you'll ruin out. It was too late again. There was another crash, and then another chair was resolved into its original elements. Confound it! Haven't you got any judgment at all? Do you want to ruin all the furniture on the place? Here, you petrified fool. But it was no use. Before I could arrest him, he sat down on the bed, and it was a melancholy ruin. Now what sort of a way is that to do? First you come lumbering about the place, bringing a legion of vagabond goblins along with you to worry me to death, and then when I overlook an indelicacy of costume which would not be tolerated anywhere by cultivated people, except in a respectable theater, and not even there if the nudity were of your sex, you repay me by wrecking all the furniture you can find to sit down on. And why will you? You damage yourself as much as you do me. You've broken off the end of your spinal column and littered up the floor with chips of your hams till the place looks like a marble yard. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're big enough to know better. Well, I will not break any more furniture, but what am I to do? I've not had a chance to sit down for a century. And the tears came to his eyes. Poor devil, I said. I should not have been so harsh with you, and you are an orphan too, no doubt. But sit down on the floor here. Nothing else can withstand your weight, and besides, we cannot be sociable with you way up there above me. I want you down where I can perch on this high counting-house stool and gossip with you face to face. So he sat down on the floor and lit a pipe which I gave him, threw one of my red blankets over his shoulders, inverted my sitz bath on his head, helmet fashion, and made himself picturesque and comfortable. Then he crossed his ankles while I renewed the fire, and exposed the flat, honeycomb bottoms of his prodigious feet to the grateful warmth. What is the matter with the bottom of your feet and the back of your legs? They are so gouged up so. Infernal chilblains. I caught them clear up to the back of my head, roosting out there under Newell's farm. But I love the place. I love it as one loves his old home. There is no peace for me like the peace I feel when I am there. We talked along for a half hour, and then I noticed that he looked tired and spoke of it. Tired? He said. Well, I should think so. And now I will tell you about it, since you have treated me so well. I am the spirit of the petrified man that lies across the street there in the museum. I am the ghost of the Cardiff giant. I can have no rest, no peace, till they have given that poor body burial again. Now what was the most natural thing for me to do? To make men satisfy this wish? Terrify them into it, haunt the place where the body lay. So I haunted the museum night after night. I even got other spirits to help me, but it did no good, for nobody ever came to the museum at midnight. Then it occurred to me to come away over there, haunt this little place. I felt that if I ever got a hearing, I must succeed, for I had had the most efficient company that perdition could furnish. Night after night we have shivered around through these mildewed halls, dragging chains, groaning, whispering, tramping up and down stairs, till, to tell you the truth, I am almost worn out. But when I saw a light in your room tonight, I roused my energies again and went at it with a deal of the old freshness. But I am tired out, entirely fagged out. Give me, I beseech you, give me some hope. I lit off my perch in a burst of excitement and exclaimed, This transcends everything! Everything that ever did occur! Why, you poor, blundering old fossil! You have had all your trouble for nothing. You have been haunting a plaster cast of yourself. The real Cardiff giant is in Albany. Confound it, don't you know your own remains? I never saw such an eloquent look of shame and pitiable humiliation overspread a countenance before. The petrified man rose slowly to his feet and said, Honestly, is that true? As true as I'm sitting here. He took the pipe from his mouth and laid it on the mantel, then stood irresolute a moment, unconsciously from old habit, thrusting his hands where his pantaloon pocket should have been, and meditatively dropping his chin on his breast, and finally said, "Well, I never felt so absurd before. The petrified man has sold everybody else, and now the mean fraud has ended by selling its own ghost. My son, if there is any charity left in your heart for a poor, friendless phantom like me, don't let this get out. Think how you would feel if you had made such an ass of yourself." I heard his stately tramp die away, step by step down the stairs and out into the deserted street, and felt sorry that he was gone, poor fellow, and sorrier still that he had carried off my red blanket and bathtub. So, that was a ghost story by Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain. And yeah, that reading through that the first time, the build up for it I thought was just awesome. Bringing all of those little elements, rattling chains and the cobwebs in there, pulling the blanket down, steps that you hear. All of these little things that people are still talking about in their ghost stories today, ghost stories that pop up in all of your paranormal shows and things like that, and just kind of rolling it all into one and then throwing the whole Cardiff Giant thing in there. And there is some factual evidence or bits of this as well. The Cardiff Giant, if you are unfamiliar, is probably is considered one of the greatest American hoaxes as well. Mr. Newell, the farm that is referenced in the story, he invited some friends over to help him dig a well, and this was back in like the late 1800s. And while they're digging this well, they came across this petrified man, and this was in Cardiff, New York, where the Cardiff Giant name comes from. And this guy, they dug up this petrified man who was like 10 feet tall and weighed like almost a ton. And it caused a hell of a stir because, it looked real. It fooled a lot of people for a lot of years. And there was actually a replica that was made of that was passed off as the real Cardiff Giant, which is what this story is referring to as far as the fake plaster that this ghost was haunting. So, and it's referring to the fact that the Cardiff Giant never left Cardiff, New York. It stayed there on Newell's farm because he wanted the money for all of the tourist attractions. And even P.T. Barnum, I believe it was P.T. Barnum, offered him like an unholy amount of money for this thing, and he refused, and tried to kept all this stuff going. And then when it was finally determined to be a hoax, obviously he lost everything on it. So it's one of those things, if you're trying to pull off a major hoax like that, and you get somebody that big carny guy like P.T. Barnum that says, hey, I'll buy this off you, sell it. Take the money, run, go start a new life. There was no social media back then to haunt you with something like that. So the man could have died extremely rich, living out his dreams somewhere nice, warmer than Cardiff, New York. But he was greedy, tried to keep all the fame for himself, and ended up kind of getting screwed on the whole deal. So there is still plaques up around the town about the Cardiff Giant, so you can look that up and do some research for yourself on that. It's an amusing story, and that's where we're at for tonight. So thank you very much for tuning in for that. Coming up next week, we are going back to the world of Edgar Allan Poe with The Black Cat, which should be one of Grace's favorites. Right, Grace? That's right. So we've got Edgar Allan Poe with The Black Cat coming up next week on Wednesday. And don't forget, we also on Mondays do our New Music Monday here on Rock Soul Radio, and we'll be featuring tracks from Stillwell. That is coming up in 9, 12, and 3 o'clock every Monday. We do a featured track off of a new CD that's either recently been released or just made its way to the Rock Soul Radio studio to get all of that good stuff. I'm going to see if I can grab Grace real quick to give everybody a little goodbye from her. Gracie. So once again, this is our buddy Grace, who's hanging out in the studio with us. She is a foster for Cat Van Doo, and she is going to be up for adoption very, very soon. She is our background noise specialist in the studio, so if you're ever listening in and you hear the noises, it is this beautiful furry little face that is making those sounds. So say goodnight, Gracie. Good night, Gracie. And with that, we will call it a night, and thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much to the Facebook folks that were watching the live stream, and if you have missed any of this, you can always get caught up in the archives at podcast.rocksoulradio.com, and give it a like there on Podbean, follow the page, and you will be notified every time I put a new story up. So in case you miss it, in case you're busy on Wednesday nights, because sometimes people have things going on. In the meantime, hey, happy Valentine's Day, happy, it's not really happy Ash Wednesday, but I don't know, blessed Ash Wednesday? How's that? Happy Lupercalia, and I hope that you all have a fantastic evening enjoying the rest of your day. So with that, thank you very much, and we are signing off. Back to some more music.